So this is a SIG automation meeting on the 7th of March. So as the agenda, let me share the agenda topics. Share the screen. You see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So today we basically have two topics. One is the sub-project announcement. So I think, John, you are going to, are you able to talk? You're probably able to talk about it. And then the second topic, we have Arvin, but he's also on the car. So depending on how we go about it. But let's start with the first one, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, not much here. Just wanted to say we talked about it last week, but we put a in the GitHub, we put a description of the 3 different sub-projects for SIG automation, and we're doing the same for SIG Release. And then I have a form I'll send out in the next, hopefully today, which will ask people to just check off the sub-projects they're interested in and can participate in. And then the next step from there will be to kind of take those smaller groups and meet and set up a regular meeting time for them. And I think probably this meeting time will get reused as one of those, but or canceled, because I think we only need one big full SIG meeting a week. And so that's all really. Just so look for that email, try to respond as quickly as you can, because just, you know, time's ticking fast. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. So one thing is interest. So are we, I think the main question is asking for the people interest, but mainly interest in contributing, I'm assuming, right? And
yeah, maybe I have to make sure the form says that you're able to contribute to, not just, I mean, anybody's welcome to join the meetings, but we're trying to get an idea. I mean, once we divide up into the groups, then the lead person or shepherd of that group will figure out what their capacity is and use that to sort of say, hey, we can make our one in this time frame or not.
Yeah. And so, yeah, okay. Yeah, so so yeah, what we are asking is really, if you say yes, that means that we are expecting some level of contribution, whether it's code or reviews or testing or documentation. So that can be in any form of that, I guess, right? Maybe I missed something, but it's rather broad. Of course, that doesn't, so you can still participate in the meeting even if you don't contribute, because we want to have those meetings still open and accessible for anyone to join in the open spirit, right, that we work in. So, which probably means also that timing-wise of the meeting, because at some point there was a request from, I think, Ganesh at some point to have some different time zone options, but I don't know how we are going to accommodate that. Should we try to stick to around the time frames that we have so far in place?
And I think each group will decide that, but, you know, I suspect, like you, that in general, we're going to end up around the same times, because that seems to be kind of the best we can do across the world. It's awkward time for almost everybody, but as evidenced by me and Arvind in the car, but it's probably most convenient for us. So, you know, we'll do the best we can in each group. If there's a preponderance of one time zone, it might end up there, but we'll see.
Yeah, but baseline, I think we should try to keep it around the time zone that we have, and then depending on how the groups evolve or this, we might see what we can do depending on the team. Okay, yeah, makes sense. Which means probably, I think, then from next week onwards, John, also, I think we probably, I think it's better to cancel this meeting and to basically come up with a new meeting specifically for that subgroup, right? I think it's probably, just to avoid the confusion, it's probably better that we cancel this one.
Sure.
And then, or
Okay.
that would be.
So we'll go back to just the Wednesday meetings for all SIG, and then each subgroup, it's up to them to decide when they want to meet for when and how often they want to meet.
Yeah. Yeah, Vish, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I have a question. So one, Slack. I mean, I think Slack is one of those things that will help us with this asynchronous communication. But the question I had about Slack is it still an evaluation license that we have? Are we going to lose any of the conversation histories?
Great question. Yeah, we have not. We can talk to the Linux Foundation, see if they can get us a open source. So if you look at like CNCF or Kubernetes Slack, like they get a special discount of some sort from Slack. Right now with 300 Slack members, I think, it would be, I don't know, if I remember right, something like $3,000 a month or something. And given that Nephew doesn't even have a funding model other than Google gave some money a year ago, I don't think that's viable. So for now it is through May, but now as hopefully companies start to pitch in money, we can talk and maybe we can get Safe Linux Foundation can negotiate some better deal with Slack. Yeah. Well, so in short, the short answer is yes, they're not lost for good. They just hide them. They hide older things until you pay, but that won't happen until late May.
Okay, so we don't have to worry at this point of time about trying to move to a different workspace or anything. So we continue to use the same thing.
Yeah, for now we just keep using the same one.
Okay, with the hope that money will be paid and we can recover all our conversations at a later point. Cool.
Yeah, or a deal will be struck of some sort. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked about Slack is for members that are going to join later. I mean, I see us as early members. People who are going to come in later, they want to go look at the history. They want to go search it. So I'm a big proponent of this using Slack because they can actually go search for it and ask questions and, pick up the thread and ask context-based questions there. Whoever is coming new, want to help them come up to speed. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and we created the Slack channels for the individual subgroups already. I hope that you saw that. We will have to do the same for the SIG. So there will be also 2 SIG release subgroups. One for the test framework and one for the release management. So we will also, so that has to still happen, but maybe I don't know whether Steven will do that. Is Steven on the call? Okay, no, we'll discuss with him, but we'll do the same. Yeah, so sorry, you raised your hand.
Oh, just quickly, sorry I came in late. The subgroup, whatever, will also be doing their own documentation of whatever design decision, blah, 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 right? So that should help with newcomers also.
Yeah,
Plus, it help us.
What we need to do, and this is a good point, like we need to do a better, like right now everything's been sort of very dynamic, but I think that as we make these decisions, we should be documenting the designs in GitHub in some sort of design proposal or design, like similar to for those who have been involved in Kubernetes, there's a KEP process. Now that came in much later in Kubernetes because of similar reasons, right? Levels of formality get increase as the project matures, but we definitely need to at least document our basic design decisions as we go through. And so what we should probably do, I guess, is what I'm trying to say is come up with a way for the whole community to do that, so each of those subgroups doesn't come up with a totally different way. But yes, I agree, they should document them.
Yeah, the idea. Yeah, I agree. I think the subgroups is one is focus on their respective CRDs, the reference designs, reference code implementations, and of course also the architectural things that they, or how the subsystem works. Basically, I think it's as important, because that's the piece where we are struggling with, at least for a number of people. We haven't documented every nitty-gritty details, right? That's why why at some point Arvind was so we have done some documentation, but not to the level of detail that people are expecting. And we hope that through those subgroups, we can also address that to a certain extent. Yeah, Ravi, you raised your hand.
Yeah, on this documentation, I'm because people who come from other SDOs and all, right? I'm not sure if everybody's, at least I'm not familiar with how you manage design documents through GitHub. Because documentation I see is all around, right? I mean, we had something for one summit, but do we have one place where all the design documents are kind of is a repository for that, and there's an organized section for that? It's kind of spread around, I feel, right now. I mean, if I want to contribute to a specific, if I were to say that, okay, I'll participate in any of these subgroups and help with some of the documentation, where is that one place?
Yeah, John, you want to?
So there's actually, I think what we'll have are two places. One for contributors and developers, and another for users. So for users, I created a Nefio/docs, which has nothing in it yet, but that's where we do tutorials. We'll do, all the user-facing documentation. And actually, I did put in there. We can discuss this more, or I guess right now I can ask your opinions. Like, I did put in, I think, in my issues in Nefio docs, things around like general controller design, things like that, like as things we should, and best practices and things like that. That might be for, I guess, let's think about this, right? There's different constituent stakeholders. There's the people building Nefio itself. That's what I was talking about a minute ago. There, they should go in the Nefio repository, and we'll create there isn't one yet, but we'll create a designs or design proposals or something directory there, and we can start to document those things. So that's one. Two is there's the end users. So the end users are people who need to actually, use Nefio to deploy software. That definitely belongs in the docs directory. And then there's these sort of intermediate things of, well, there's administrators, that belongs in the Nefio docs. There's vendors that want to onboard their functions to Nefio. There's infrastructure, that's both network function and infrastructure vendors who want to onboard. And there's probably the people who want to build controllers or other things that are sort of add-ons to Nefio. So those are the ones that are a little less clear to me where they go. Probably they also go in the user-facing docs. So we draw a bright line between people who are contributing like to the upstream Nefio project versus people who are building on top of it or adding content effectively. That's my thinking right now. I'm curious what others think. And so the differentiation would be Nefio project/Nefio and Nefio project/docs are the two different repositories.
I was thinking about, having the docs, but kind of then fanning out from there so that one place people can go and then deep dive based on their area of interest. I was just trying to kind of say that, if you spread it out, then people don't know where to go. Docs make sense, and we just start in docs, and then you can at least index it, saying that have some table of content there, and then kind of index it to some other URLs.
Yeah, that's true. We can reference back to the developer docs for developers from the main docs.
Yeah.
But the main docs, yeah, there's a repository for it's intended to be like, for example, where the website would eventually be generated out of, right? There should be a documentation website. So So that's the Nefio project / docs is the repository for that. All that's there right now, I think, is a short README and some issues I created around things I think we need to create, documents we need to create, but I don't think there's any actual documentation there yet. And similarly, like we have the one project repository that needs to be retired and even archived at some point. Like that was intended to be for that one project, and the code that's in there needs to be migrated to and modified to be, something that's part of a downloadable sandbox and all of that SIG Release is working on.
Sure. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one, I had a discussion last week also about one of the challenges that we have today in the team is like we had lots of at the moment most of our documents are in Google Drive, I would say, right? Or at least that's where a lot of our discussion and presentations and what have you. So that's where we have been communicating around and made proposals, but that will move actually to Git, and these are just inputs to basically come to that thing. So eventually Git will be our source of truth for everything.
Yeah, I agree. So the reason is that's controlled. It's source controlled. It's controlled on who can commit, whereas things like Wiki and Docs are much less controlled. So for official documentation, I prefer to use Git. And so that's what I did with the areas thing. We started with a document, we talked about it in there, and then I tried to distill the decisions down into the Git repo. So that's kind of the model for everything should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this topic, or I don't know if Arvind's able to present. If not, what we should do.
I can present.
Okay.
Hello. Yeah. Okay.
Are you on a safe place? I hope, Arvind.
Yeah.
Bala.
Sorry, one last question, very quick one before Arvind goes. So the thanks, Wim, for creating the subgroups and all. Obviously, for discussion's sake, anybody could join the subgroups. I wanted to understand when we work, how do we need to make sure, obviously each group's works will affect everybody else, right? So especially the interfaces, there's some of the important decisions, and when I say interfaces, both southbound and northbound for each group that affects others. Probably those discussions will happen in the main meeting is what I understand, right, Wim?
Yeah, John, you want to?
Oh yeah, I mean, you can, yes, and on Slack, right? That's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Both, I think it will be both on Slack. Probably we have to raise them, because the challenge will be with our main meeting is it's going to be a coordination meeting.
Oops.
All right, so there's probably, I think Ravi, is it possible?
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Wim.
I'm sorry, I'm in the car. I'm just dropping my.
I'll mute you. Is it okay if I mute you, or? Yeah. Okay.
I'm.
No worries.
Yeah,
so we have to probably, I think, Bala, it's a very good point, and I think the main meeting is for that, but we should not wait. Sometimes these decisions are important, so we try to resolve it ASAP, but because the main meeting, if we have only 1 hour, we probably, I don't know how it will go. If you have 10 topics, probably you will be able to at max do 2, I guess, you see, so it becomes a bottleneck by itself. But we'll have to see and improve based on what we see happening. But there is a few still important things that we need to sort out, I think. I think one is what Arvind potentially will address today. Arvind, are you on a safe place, or should I present? I have the document.
I already shared. Can you guys see my screen?
No, I think, or I don't, because I have to stop sharing, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, there
Yeah,
are
now
two
you-
screens
there you
visible.
go.
Yeah.
Oh, now you
Now
can
it's
see.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think we last meeting we stopped at injecting cluster invariance stuff. Do you want me to briefly kind of touch upon what we already discussed, or should we continue from where we left off?
I think the brief introduction again, maybe a couple of minutes will be very helpful for everyone. Arvind.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So one lot has changed since we last spoke, right? The CRDs have changed in a meaningful way, right? Like, so all of this as it is will not be applicable, but here we have to assume that enough topology CRD existed at a high level, right? With that assumption, we have to go into this. We have to change the sequence a bit, like once we accommodate the new set of CRDs that we have, right? That's just a disclaimer. But here, I think what we discussed last week was person A will apply the NF topology to the management cluster. And there will be a controller called NF topology controller, which creates a package variant with two sets of attributes. One is upstream, another is downstream. Upstream is the blueprint package. And coming from a blueprint repository, and the BP here is blueprint. I didn't get a chance to expand that, but yeah, BP here is blueprint. So there's a blueprint package coming from a blueprint repository, and downstream is an organization repository, if you will. And basically what we are taking is taking that package, blueprint package, and we are going to modify that, right? Like, so this is organization repository.
Sorry, are you showing a diagram?
I am.
He's
You guys are
showing- Yeah, I see it.
Oh, okay. You see it.
I see it, but I don't know whether everybody sees, but I see it.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, the sequence.
see it too.
Yeah. By the way, also
John,
Vish,
yeah, John has got
raised
his
his
hand
hand.
raised. Not sure if he's, but
I think that's.
Arvind, one other question for you.
No, I didn't
request.
mean to raise my hand, but I think
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
my face did it with the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the requests is if you can also call out for the benefit, since it's recorded, and for folks who want to probably review this later, what are some of the things that folks should be familiar? For example, now we are introducing things like packaging variant and all this stuff, right? So most people.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, definitely. So we
Okay.
try to summarize it at least a very high level, right? Like these are some of the Porsche custom resources that like folks need to be familiar with, like things like this. So there is a short. We did go through this last meeting. Like we went through kind of package revision resource, package variant, and variant set, and what these are.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think this document is probably will give you a good summary of what these are. But then you can deep dive. I've put the references to the code as well for folks who want to deep dive. Tal has a comment. Okay, yeah, Tal is saying that there will be he's working on a tutorial for package variant controllers and stuff. Thanks, Tal. Anything you want to add, Tal?
No, this is awesome what you're doing. I love this.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Right. So Vish, is it okay, or did I answer your question? Or
Yes, I think you did, because somebody who look at this video will also look at the document that you have, and they'll probably go review that in order to get familiar with this.
Right. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So we create a package variant with an upstream blueprint, and the downstream is organization repository, for lack of better name, right? That's the repository where we are going to modify the blueprint that we just kind of cloned, right? So we create a package variant. I'm not going into details because we kind of touched upon. I want to get to where we left off, right? I'm just giving a kind of brief overview. This package variant is then reconciled by a different controller called package variant controller. And what that controller does is takes this package variant and creates two types of resources, right? Like package revision resource and package revision resources. The names are kind of similar. So the package revision is the metadata of the repository of the package, right? And package revision resource contains the contents of the repository. So what I've showed here is only, because there's not enough space, I've just showed only package revision resource. But the main thing to take away here is it will contain the entire contents of the package, right? So the resource, under resources, you can see, I don't know if you can you see my arrow or probably not?
Yes. Yeah, we
Or you
can.
can, okay, perfect. Yeah, so under resources, you can see different files, right? Like the kept is a file, upf deployment.yaml is a file. So these are the files in the actual blueprint repository that we cloned, right? So those contents, the entire contents of that repository, or in this specific case, this package is stored under resources. So each file will be a separate resource under resources, right? So that's what we are highlighting here. So after we have cloned, so all we have did is clone a package and create a package revision resource for it, which has the contents of the package, right? That's all we have did so far. After that, the NF topology controller kind of kicks in, and what it does is it injects all the cluster invariant stuff. So things that don't change from cluster to cluster, right? For example, capacity information, and what are the different interfaces you need, right? Like, for example, here it is injecting a bunch of conditions. If you can see here, it says M3 IP.
I think this is where we have to discuss whether we do it at this stage or later. I think that's one of the discussions we need to have. I think what would be our approach here.
Right, yes, yes. So the only quirk is we don't want multiple, I mean, preferably we don't want, I know in this case, we may not have enough topology, but here I think we chose this path because we didn't want multiple people to kind of go and try to interpret enough topology. It will be much cleaner if one controller is kind of responsible for reconciling or whatever in enough topology, right? That's why I think we kind of chose that approach. But yeah, with the new CRDs, we kind of have to revisit that topic.
Yeah, because right now the packages already have that have all these interfaces sorted somehow. They are not exactly in the UPF deployment, but they are kind of as individual resources in the package. So you kind of already have this to a certain extent expanded because you selected. That's something we have to discuss. Probably not word today, but it's probably one of the things that I think we should come up with a strategy.
Subgroups we can jump in and kind of deep dive, and then once we have decided on, or once we have a flow again, maybe we can present to the group, clarifying how this will look like with the new CRDs, right? Yeah. So here
my only comment was to the whole group is like we probably have to discuss a little bit how this will look like with all the changes that we have done. That was my only thing. And it can still be something like we present here. I'm not excluding it, but I think we should probably ensure that we have a single strategy, and then, okay, we take it from there, and then that's it. Yeah.
Right. No, definitely. I think we are just walking through for sake of completion because we started it, we are just finishing it through. And then, yes, we need to kind of revamp this based on new CRDs. But some of the concepts you can still take away, things like package variant, package revision resource, those constructs people still have to be familiar. So I think maybe those are the takeaways from this sequence, if you will, right? Maybe not the exact sequence. So we update the package revision resource with cluster invariant stuff. So in this specific example, we have assumed NF topology has things like capacity, and it also specifies what are the different interfaces that you need, right? So those are cluster invariant. So what we have did here is injected capacity here. You can see that downlink throughput, uplink throughput. Besides that, under conditions, you will see that we have specified a bunch of conditions, right? And we need N3 IP address, we need N4 IP address, we need N6 IP address, and we have set the status to false with the hope that some other controller will come and reconcile that, right? Like satisfy that, if you will. So now that cluster invariant stuff is injected, the next thing is to fan out, right? At the end of the day, we want these packages to be replicated across different workload clusters and customized for those workload clusters so that we can push it down to the workload clusters, right? So that's the goal. So we have injected the cluster invariant stuff. Then NF topology controller creates something called as package variant set. The package variant set, the upstream for the package variant set is this package that we just created, right? The UPF blueprint modified, PP modified package. So we take that package as the upstream, and we specify a condition with match labels, which is to guide which is to basically say what are the rules for fan out, right? So here we are saying, hey, any repository which has this US Central 1 or Edge label, you need to create a replica of this BP modified package, right? That's the kind of intent being established with this package variant set. So there is a different controller called package variant set controller, which will kind of take this and reconcile, right? So that's step 6. So step 6 is, okay, so the assumption here is we already have two, going back to this deep dive, right? We spoke about a CRD called, custom resource called repository, right? So for each repository that we have, like in this example, we are assuming that we have workload cluster 1 repository and workload cluster 2 repository that was pre-configured, right, before this whole flow started. And those repositories will probably be annotated or tagged. Sorry, go ahead. Did someone have a point? Okay, I was not sure what that was. Okay. So basically, there will be two repositories, right? Workload cluster 1 repository and workload cluster 2 repository, previously already kind of created in the management cluster. Based on that, the package variant set controller will be able to figure out, okay, I need to create 2 clones of this package, right? So what it does is it creates 2 package variant resources. So as you can see, the first one, 6A, shows that the upstream is the same blueprint modified package, while the downstream is workload cluster 1 repository. And 6B is the same thing, same upstream, but the downstream is workload cluster 2 repository. So I think Tal has, yes, Tal is right. Package division resource is technically not a CR. The package division resource, sorry, the package revision is the CR. That's the only thing you can watch for when you're writing controllers. Package division resources is not yet technically the CR. You're right. Yeah, I didn't want to go into that detail here because it's a little bit tricky. Yeah. Okay, so let's see this. Yeah, so we create 6A is we create a package variant with the downstream of workload cluster 1, and 6B is we create a package variant with the downstream of workload cluster 2. So once those two are done, like similar to before, package variants are reconciled by a different controller called package variant controller. So that kicks in, right? So 7A is basically package variant created in 6A. For that, the package variant creates the package revision and package revision resources, similar to what we saw before, right? But this time, obviously, it also contains the cluster invariant stuff that we previously injected, right? Capacity and all the status information. And 7B is, again, the package variant controller, kind of reconciling the package variant that got created in 6B, right? So that's what we have shown here. The package name is obviously UPF workload cluster 1, and in the first case, it's workload cluster 1 and 2, respectively. So after these are created,
Aravind, Anna has a question, I think, or she raised her hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, she did? Oh, and please go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, quick question. Do you have a sample of the package variant and package revision and package revision resources?
Yeah, so package revision resources is what I'm showing here. It's sample,
Okay.
as in you want an actual YAML file or something with.
Yeah, like, I'm trying to mimic this for SMF, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think Tal is
So,
working on it. I don't know if that is Tal. Is that something you're going to cover as part of the tutorial that you're building, Tal?
Well, I'll cover how it's used. I'm going to purposely not use anything from Nefio in it. I just kind of want people to understand the basic tooling, right? But yeah, I'll show you how it's used. It's rather simple. Both of these controllers, package variant, excuse me, and package variant sent are pretty simple controllers. So
yeah, so if folks
Oh,
are
no,
interested,
sorry, not the controller, the package revision and the package revision resource.
oh yeah, I will go over those as well.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, but by the way, in the current POC, if you do kubectl get package revision resources, you will see that content already. So if you take the POC and you just do a kubectl get package resource revision, you will get the output of it.
Okay, thanks.
so
I missed that.
but if you're also interested in the schema and things of that nature, right? Like I've put the links in this doc, so you can go and take a look at the link there, and it will show you the Go struct and the spec and with some description. That might also be helpful.
Oh yeah, thank you. I missed that too. Wow.
So for each of them.
Can you possibly paste the link to the doc in the chat?
This document, yeah, I can.
Thank you.
Me.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we were at 7A, right? Yeah. So we have created two sets of package revision, one for workload cluster 1, another for workload cluster 2, right? So now that so this is officially the fan out has started, right? Like we have created two packages, one specifically meant for workload cluster 1 and another for workload cluster 2. So now that this fan out is done, next these conditions
Actually,
that
can I pause you
go
there
ahead.
a second, Aravind? Sorry. Just to reference our earlier topic, this is where the handoff happens between package management subproject and package specialization subproject. So after fan out,
Right.
the package management subproject in this provisioning flow, that subproject is sort of out of the picture, right? And it's the rest of the stuff Aravin's going to describe is the other subprojects.
Exactly. Yeah. So the only thing we need to clarify is like we have to recreate this flow, if you will, for the new diagram, is so that we can clarify what is done. Like for example, cluster invariant stuff, you could inject post fan out or pre fan out, right? That's a decision that both the groups need to kind of decide together, right? So
Yeah, the current discussion is if some of the things that you've talked about doing with the controller will just be captured in the blueprint package, but we'll talk about that in the other meetings.
Right. Yeah. So all I'm saying is we need to kind of conclude and document so that this separation is clear. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's that plus I think how we get to the cluster info somehow. I think these are the two things we have to sort out. In my view, if once we have a strategy around that, I think we can move on independently, probably, or as independent as possible.
Right. So next comes the IPAM injector. I've not shown everything, the injector controller. I've just shown one entity called IPAM injector, which is going to somehow get the IP addresses because these conditions are being watched for. So basically what's happening is the IPAM injector controller, if you will, is kind of watching for package revision, right? And once you have package revision, I think it also watches for package revision that is deployable, I think. So there is a field called deployment, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. In the package revision, that will tell it deployable.
It's a field on the repository. So
is it not here?
So the repository so once it's cloned to that to a deployment repository.
Sorry, I'm highlighting this. So if you look at this one, right? So IPAM injector needs to watch for package revision along with basically it has to do two things, right? It looks for package revision which has a condition, and also that package revision should be deployable, right? All these should satisfy. And only then, so that's what I'm highlighting here. The deployment needs to be true. In addition to that, sorry, going back to this, right?
So just
it's watching for these conditions being false. If these two are valid, then it goes and allocates an IP and injects the IP. Sorry, John.
If I can, Aravind, if I can just say, so each controller, there was a question or a point Stephen brought up a while back about controllers claiming ownership over certain parts. This is actually done today via the type of condition. So each controller manages a certain type of condition. And so the IPAM controller manages these IPAM allocation conditions. You could have a VLAN tag controller that looks for conditions tagged VLAN. We have other things like our injection. We can have other kinds of injectors that look for particular types of conditions. And the idea behind this is that the package author, by specifying certain resources or conditions, can essentially invoke controllers. And so we can have a whole suite of controllers that do different things, but the only ones that will engage on a given
package being deployed are the ones that the package requires.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe if I may, at least I don't know. I think it will still be like that, right? Because the watch that these controllers do on those package revision resources, right, is also a kind of a special watch. It's not a regular watch that we typically have because it's actually Porsche who is scheduling them at regular. So what you see is that I don't know whether this has improved, John, but at the moment I think every minute you get scheduled somehow. At least in the POC, what you see is that every minute Porsche schedules, and then these controllers will based on these conditions. I don't know whether it changed.
Right. This gets into a deeper discussion that Tal was bringing up, that package revision is an ordinary CR. Package revision resources is not. It's what we call an aggregated API. And so you can't do a normal watch on an aggregated API. And so it's polling. But from the point of view of the client, it should be more or less the same.
Yeah. But what I'm trying to get to is it's not like you get an event. Like in a regular watch, you have a change on the CR and you get an event. It's not like that. The behavior that you see in the controller here is more, you get a scheduled, let's say, reconciliation loop. Of course, what goes behind, or for the controller, it's the same, but it's not like you get a trigger based on a change. It's not like that.
Right, right. We could probably improve that, but how it works right now is that way. Yeah.
And then the second thing that I wanted to highlight at the moment for the POC is what I'm referring to, Aravind. The way it works today, I think, is that the NF injector controller, which a piece of it in this diagram sits in the package variant part, but there is a second piece of the NF injector is that it actually creates CRs for each of the IPs that have to be allocated. So there is a dedicated CR for IP allocation that is being created by the NF injector. And then it also, in the current POC I'm talking about, and that one is setting the condition. So at the moment in the POC, the NF injector does two things. It basically actuates the UPF deployment. So it basically expands it. And secondly, it will create in the package, so it will create in the package, it will create IP allocation CRs, and it sets the condition to false on IP allocation. And then it's the IPAM injector that takes the IP allocation CRs with the conditions based on the scheduling, and then he is actuating it. And then there is the next stage. So basically there is two steps at the moment, and probably we have to discuss how we, what we move where and stuff like that. So yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and I know we're getting a little bit deeper maybe than we should, but Wim, I think that's actually the right, like having a resource that then implies the condition is basically we're surfacing the status of that resource in this package condition, I think is the right way to do it. And but we can do that probably in a general way that each controller doesn't need to code that separately.
Yeah. Agree. Yeah.
Bala has his hand up.
Yeah. Thanks, John, and thanks, Arvind and Wim. So have some very, very general questions. So the events of the sequence of events that are happening here, the one thing is clear, is obviously there are a bunch of CR, package variant is a CR, and the package variant set is a CR. So whenever that object get created, that controller is obviously watching for those CRs, and those get kicked in. And then package variant resource is, as we understand now, it's not a CR. So to me, my fundamental question is, so when it's a CR, obviously when the controller gets kicked in is very clear. But in this particular example, the IP address, what's still not clear to me is when exactly it gets kicked in. For example, in my understanding, for it to allocate IP addresses, obviously the cluster context needs to be set before IP address allocation gets kicked in. So I think it needs to watch for those conditions as well. So, and I also understand it's a part of, it's also looking at some of the the GitOps stuff, it is basically either it needs to be in a draft state or it needs to be in some other state. So to me, what's not clear is this, the conditions, the conditionals, the controllers or the functions, whatever is going to satisfy certain conditions on a package. When, what are they watching and when will they kick in? So that's,
yeah,
I think you might have already invoked, you might have already said, John, but still, it's slightly confusing.
No, you made a couple of good points, and I try to remember all of them. One is things like cluster context have to be set first. So what I guess isn't shown here is, yes, there should be a condition also for cluster context. I think what we did in the workshop, if I recall correctly, was remember this flow is a little different and we still haven't, and it's changing again. So if we go back to the workshop flow, the first thing that is the cluster context was injected during fan out, because the fan out controller knows which cluster is being targeted and it can inject that resource then. And it sets a condition saying that's been done. The NF injector in the workshop actually looked for that condition. It knew that it needed cluster context because it knew there was information in cluster context that it needed in order to do its thing, which was create those IPAM requests that Wim was talking about, because those IPAM requests needed site information, which comes out of the cluster context. So it was able to, there was a relationship between those two controllers. The relationship is mitigated by these conditions. So this is modeled after the same way we do it in Kubernetes. In Kubernetes, there's a ready condition on a pod. There's a readiness. You can add, other controllers can add other conditions. And there's actually a field you can set in there that says, here's the collection of conditions I need in order to add this pod to a service as an endpoint. We can do a similar thing. We can create a field that, or something, maybe we have to, there's still details to work out, but we can create a coordination mechanism like that where the package author can say, these are the conditions that need to be met to move to this next set, and these conditions get sort of interactively resolved. So what we did in the workshop was we built that into the NF controller, the NF injector, said, I have cluster context, I have the type of thing that I'm deploying, the UPF, which included some list of number of different types of interfaces I need. So I have enough information to generate IPAM requests. I generate IPAM requests, which results in unsatisfied IPAM conditions. That's what the IPAM controller is looking for. It's just looking for unsatisfied IPAM conditions. And it goes, and then there's enough information in the IPAM request for it to make an allocation. And it writes the allocation back into the package and sets the condition to true. So the idea is that it's not a hard-coded flow in some big orchestrator. It's individual controllers sort of publishing information and other controllers reading information. And once the later controllers have enough information to make their decisions, they engage. So that's that coordinated aspect, or choreography rather than orchestration, right? It's I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, like it's independent actors coordinating on some unit. The other question you asked, I've forgotten.
Yeah, that's, I think when which controller is triggered, I think it's the watch is the, I think he's asking more. When is which controller triggered based on the condition? I think that was the second question. I think Bala, right?
I see. Yeah, exactly. Not the CR stuff, but to the controllers that satisfy the conditions. Yeah.
Right. So we have to look into the details. I think you can watch package revision and that's sufficient. I think that we surface the changes in underlying content. Remember, there's a one-to-one relationship between a package revision and package revision resources. So package revision is the metadata, and it's an actual CR that can be watched. These conditions, I believe, are surfaced on the package revision. Package revision resources is just the raw content. And so you watch the package revision, there's something in Porch that's watching the underlying Git repo, and when a change is made to it, it's gonna fire a watch off on the package revision. I think if it doesn't work that way today, we probably should make it work that way. But
I think today it doesn't work like that, I think, John, because I think what I see or I saw, and maybe it has changed, is that you get always triggered no matter. So that basically what Porch does at the moment is that it has a list of package revision, right? And it basically goes through the list and it basically, the watch is basically triggered by whether it's work to do or not, doesn't really matter. And work will be done when the condition is unsatisfied. So in other words, what you see, even when they are allocated, you see the IPAM injector still being scheduled, but it looks, okay, my condition is satisfied, I don't do anything. So at the moment, it's kind of following a mechanism and it's always, but probably can be improved. But that's what I saw. I haven't recently looked at it, but I think that's what I saw.
I doubt it's changed. So that's probably, yeah, so there's optimization we can do, but yeah. Functionally, it should be equivalent.
Yeah. So
but at the moment, Bala, yeah. So at the moment, Bala, how it works at the moment is that Porch has a set of package revisions, right, and the equivalent resource list of it, and it goes through all of them. And basically, when you watch, when you attach a watch on the controller, you get to the work on it. And if you then see that the condition is unsatisfied, you act. So that's kind of a little bit the current mechanism. So it's a bit of a pulling thing through all the resources on a regular basis. That's also why probably we see the polling interval at the moment being rather large, right? So because we can probably improve it because every resource is being acted upon whether work has to be done or not. But I think this can be improved because it has the condition. So it could probably be a bit smart, doing a bit more smart on that level. But that's, I think, how I saw it being working in November, so end of last year time frame.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Wim. So today, in this particular example, so IPAM controller, which is responsible for satisfying the IP addresses for all the interfaces. So it is watching the package revision. And then based on the contents of package revision and obviously package revision resource it will have, and then it will see for each one of them whether I need to do any work. And then if there is work needs to be done, it will do it. And otherwise it will say, I don't have anything here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of optimization. There's a bunch of subtleties there that occur in any declarative system that we're going to need to resolve, and I don't think we did in the workshop. And this would be something that sub-project probably needs to work on. Like, you make an allocation, you write an allocation, then somebody goes in and changes something in the resource. You need to understand that it's changed. So you probably need to calculate a hash and store the hash about what was the value of the spec was at the time you generated the allocation. So you know if you need to invalidate the condition, flip it back to false. So there's a bunch of subtleties we're going to need to work on for day 2 type of things. But that's the basic flow. What you said is we're watching once it's in the POC, I believe. Once it's satisfied, and I guess you could go undo it, but I don't know what would happen. It's sort of unpredicted, or maybe Wim knows, but I don't know what would happen. So there are a bunch of issues to deal with, but yes, that's the basic idea, what you said.
So in the interest of time, should we just finish this? Because I just want to make sure we finish this today.
Sorry, I get talking.
Right, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so I did ping the code for the injector code that we have in OneSummit. So please feel free to take a look if that's helpful. So yeah, so we inject the IPs. So IPAM injector injects the IPs, and you can see that it sets the conditions to true because it has injected the IPs for N3, N4, and N6, right? So that's 8A is for workload cluster 1, and 8B is for workload cluster 2. So after this is done, what we have is all the conditions, at least in this example, are satisfied, and the package can now be promoted from, let's say, draft state to proposed state. So if you remember, person A is the one who kind of applied the NF topology to the management cluster, and at step 9, person A kind of goes through the draft KEP packages, right? This could be through UI or some KEP commands. However, he or she reviews the KEP packages for workload cluster 1 and 2 and upgrades them from draft to proposed state, right? So once that's done, so we have assumed here that person A does not have the right to kind of move it to approved or published state, right? So there's a different person, person B, here, who comes in, who has the approval rights, and they review the proposed KEP package for both workload cluster 1 and 2. And if they're satisfied, then they move it from proposed to approved state. At this point, so we have config syncs that were previously installed in both workload cluster 1 and workload cluster 2, right? That's part of the preparation of the clusters, right? So the config sync will then kick in, and because config sync will pull these packages once they are in published state. Now that they move to published state, config sync will kind of pull this and apply the KRM resources in the KEP package. So this 11A is for workload cluster 1 and 11B is for workload cluster 2. I think that pretty much ends this sequence flow. Yeah, please feel free to ask questions if there are any.
One I think important thing, one maybe a clarification or is that not all these resources that are in the package are actually applied to the workload cluster. The other thing that we haven't kept is there is an annotation that is being set to identify whether a CR that is in the KEP package is to be applied to the cluster or not, right? So what you see is that all these IP addresses or IPAMs, they were basically intermediately created as CRs, but we are setting this annotation flag to say this is a local config. So when config sync takes the package and applies it to the workload cluster, you only see the CRs that don't have this flag set being applied to the cluster. So that's maybe another thing that is interesting for people to understand. But I think Tal, you also raised your hand.
Yeah, I have a question. We discussed this, but I just want to be 100% clear. Between 8A and 8B, we're actually copying, right? It's a different package. One is called UPF Workload Cluster 1, one is called UPF Workload Cluster 2. How are we actually doing this in code, right? I know how to work with it with the command line, but are we cloning it, or are we?
So the package not in the POC. The POC works a little differently. Well, the POC does clone, but in this model here, the package variant set fans out by creating 2 package variant resources, and the package variant controller does a clone. That's what it does. That's basically the main thing it does. From that.
Okay, so it does that for us, but it creates that clone in draft state, right?
Correct.
Okay, all right, got it, thanks. Yeah, these are new controllers. I'm still learning them. Thanks.
Yeah, so that actually happened in 7A, 7B. I think 6A, 6B, we are creating package variants, and then package variant controller actually does the clone in 7A, 7B.
Right, so at that point now we have two deployment packages that are targeted for each cluster, and we can do whatever we want to them to customize them to meet that individual cluster's needs.
So, and we customize them by actually changing the package revision resources?
Correct.
Resource, okay, thanks.
Great. Yep.
Okay, I think we're out of time. We're over time.
Maybe quick for tomorrow. There was the topic of Helm. I think John should we try? I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think Erickson wanted to talk about Helm and creating either a sub-project or something to study it.
So we
Is
can
it a
discuss
R1 scope?
No.
No, it's for it's for
No.
later, but we're just gonna, anyway, we'll talk about it tomorrow. We're
Okay.
already past. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Stop
you.
recording.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.